Sounds
Sorry.
good.
Okay, this is in the background, especially in the beginning. It's good. Waking up. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Brachas Daf Nun Beis. We learned yesterday in the beginning of Elu Dvarim, in the beginning of the 8th chapter, a Mishnah, in which we have 8 machloikis in between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And what's going to happen both on Daf Nun Beis and on Daf Nun Gimel, the Gemara is going to be going through all of these 8 arguments. Many of them, Pashut, we did not explain. They have to be properly explained. Now, we did finish learning yesterday the underlying of the first machloikis in the Mishnah, right? Whether you make the Yoim first or the Yayin first, when you make Kiddush. No, today we make Berachot Agafen, then we make Mekadosh HaShabbos. That Shitas Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai says the opposite. That first comes the Kedushas HaYoim, then comes the bracha on the wine. We learned the Braisa that gave 2 reasons for Beis Shammai, 2 reasons for Beis Hillel. One very interesting argument that was made was that Tadir v'she'eino Tadir, Tadir koidim. Now, what's the Tadir? Chavra halkop, Yayin is Tadir. Just appreciate one thing: the bracha over wine, as the bracha over any food. Even though we learned many sugyas above, we accept that these brachas are midrabanan. Right? Birchas hanehenen is midrabanan. That's the way we accept. Kiddush is d'oraisa. So the question is, do we say tadir v'she'eino tadir tadir koidim even when the tadir is a d'rabanan and the she'eino tadir is a d'oraisa? Many achronim say over here in this sugya that when we make Kiddush Friday night, our Kiddush over wine is also only midrabanan. Why? Because since during davening we say the words of Kiddush, we were already Yoitze Kiddush. So they're both derabanan. So Birchas Hanehen is derabanan, Kiddush over wine is midrabanan. This just creates a big problem, which is that since women are equal mechoyev like men in keeping Shabbos, even in the positives, because Shama v'zach v'divrechad nemru, whoever's chayv on shmir is chayv on zechira. And we also learned above that someone who's only a mechoyev midrabanan cannot be moitze others who are mechoyev midoraisa. Women don't daven maidiv. How can a man make Kiddush for his wife? He's only a mechoyev midrabanan. If you're going to learn pshat that davening covers the doiraisa, and she's mechoyev midoraisa. There's a big conversation over here. Many of the opinion that when a woman benches Shabbos candles and she says good Shabbos, or when you come home from shul and she's a good Shabbos, that's also already a doiraisa de kiddush. She's being magdish the yoim with words. So therefore her chiv is also only midrabanan. That's one topic. Another thing that just to close up from yesterday, we're going to start today with Atoisus. Okay, speaking about the sugya that since we paskin like Beis Hillel that holds that you make yayin before Kiddush HaYoim, so he has a gavaldik question. When we bench ala kois, when do we make the bracha over the wine? We make it at the end of benching. Why? Why don't we follow Shitas Beis Hillel? Begin the Berachot Agafen. You're doing it ala kois, birchas hamazon, and then drink the wine. So Tosfos says there's a huge difference between Kiddush, even in Havdalah. By Havdalah also we paskin like Beis Hillel. First we make the yayin. Then at the end, Hamavdol bin Kodesh L'chol. Because Kiddush and Havdalah is not ending a meal. Fakert, you're making Kiddush to eat. Even Havdalah, now that we make Havdalah during davening, what is the one thing that we cannot do before we make Havdalah over the cup? Eating. Everything else we can do. So Havdalah is also to be matir eating. So it doesn't stop the Birchas HaYayin that you said before the Havdalah. What does Birchas HaMazon do? Says Tosfos. Birchas HaMazon ends the meal. If you would make the Berachot Agafen al hakois before you would bench, then the benching would close up the meal. That's why by benching, even Beis Hillel, nowadays we bench and then you make the Berachot Agafen after the benching. Okay, we're going to begin. Pashut going through, just to save introduction, we're going to be going through many machloikis in today of the Mishnah. And what's going to be amazing is that even though all of the machloikis was about a meal, a lot of the underlying reasons between why does Beis Shammai say this, why does Beis Hillel say that, has to do with Hilchis Tumah Tara. So today we'll have the great schus and opportunity, since there isn't Gemara, Talmud, Bavli on Taharis, but every now and then the Gemara inserts many halachas of Tumah Tara, and we'll give it the right intro when we get there. Okay, we left off 2 lines from the top of the Amit. Right, this is still referring to the first machloikis in the Mishnah. That is the machlokes between, do you say the bracha over wine first, or do you make the bracha on hayoim? The example we're giving is kiddush first. So asks the Gemara, Besavrei, Beishamai, the birchas hayoim adifa, which is what they say. In other words, according to Beishamai, when you make kiddush, you say the Yom HaShishi, we're not even discussing here. Then they would make the Mekadesh Shabbos, and then they would make the Pori B'riah Gofen, like by benching, that comes last. Ve'hotanya. Now we're going to call this the Braisa from the top of the Amid, even though that this Braisa doesn't begin that Beishamai Oimrim, it's going to be taken as a given, and we'll back that up, that this Braisa is Shitas Beishamai. And now we're going to have a stira, B'Shitas Beishamai. Chavra Haltkop. Ve'hotanya. Third line from the top. Hanichnas lebeisa b'matzei Shabbos. When a person comes home with Shabbos, as we learned already above in brachas, even though that we make nowadays Havdalah also in davening, the whole machlokes tanoim in which bracha, right? We say atochen antanu in the fourth bracha, in middle of Chen and Adas, but we also have to make Havdalah over wine. So what's the seder? And also when a pasha it's chaval al azman, but we're going to learn about this also in Psachim, that we add other brachas during the Havdalah, including that's a Gemara in Beya, that we smell some aromatic fragrance, something that smells good. If cloves smells good for you, it's also minig. So there's a reason for that. But you can smell anything that is psamim. We also make a bracha over fire. That sugi will have more in psachim. So what is the seder? Mevarech alayayin. Now again, here also, just like by Kiddush, we were not even speaking about the Yom HaShishi. Here we're not even speaking about the beginning of the Havdalah. It's not a problem. That's just like an intro. But think about it. What does this say that we do? Right? We make the psamim, then we make the fire, and then we make the bracha of Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol. So the Seder is Yayin. Now look how it's reversed there. Al Hama'oir. Here the Seder is first on the fire, then on the psamim, and then you make Havdalah. And again, this is a given. We'll see soon that this is Shitas Beishamai. Now, ve'im ein loy elo kois echad. Oh, we learned about this case in the Mishnah. Here, clearly, the way Tosfos learns the pshat over here is, not only is it that important to have Motzoi Shabbos as su'uda, right? Chassidim are very medagdik. It's called Sudas, the David Malka Mashiach, or known as Su'udas Malava Malka. But we have to wash. Suda, we have to wash on that. But we're going by the opinion that whenever you bench, you have to bench ala kois. Just to make it clear that Minik Chabad is that even when there is no minyan, when there's three people, we bench ala kois. It's that important. Now listen to this. A person comes home, Motzoi Shabbos, they did not yet make Havdalah. They have to have a Su'udas Malava Malka. You have to bench on the Su'udas Malava Malka ala kois, and this person only has 1 cup of wine. That will be the case that also we spoke about yesterday quickly and when we went through the mission. So if you're going to use up the kois for Havdalah, then you won't be able to bench ala kois. Today people will say, big deal. It's a big deal. You know how big of a deal it is? According to this Braisa, you don't make Havdalah. You wash, you have a meal before Havdalah. And then when you bench on the same cup, you're going to both bench and make Havdalah. And now the question will be, what is mentioned first? Wow. So learns...
That benching is from a Malka?
That benching is from a Lava Malka. No. The reason I mentioned that quickly yesterday is because many other Rishonim don't understand how can you eat without making Havdalah. Tosfos learns pshat over here is that it's that important not only to eat but to bench always ala kois that they allowed us to eat before Havdalah. And now the question is, what's the seder? The im ein loy elo kois echad, like we explained. Manichai la'achar hamazoin. This is the second Tosfos. V'yashleim, and I'm reading inside Tosfos, the middle of Tosfos. V'hacheshani v'kesavar, this Tana holds birchas hamazayin to unakois. We're speaking about a sud of Malava Malka. Since you have to bench ala kois, v'lachein manichai lebirchas hamazayin. Mamash Gavalik. Okay. Now, but you're not only benching, you have to make Havdalah. Not only that, you didn't even make the bracha for the fire. You didn't make the bracha for the psamim. So now the question is, what's the seder? So says this Tana, umishal shalon kulan la'achrav. Everything that we mentioned, on the order that we mentioned, what's the order? Yayin, ma'or, psamim, Havdalah is all said after Birchas Hamazon. Okay? After Birchas Hamazon. Now we got a contradiction here. It's obvious. What's the contradiction? Because including here is also Havdalah. Which one came first? Wine or Havdalah? This Tana is saying that wine comes before Havdalah. In the Mishnah we say, whenever there's a bracha connected to the day, like we spoke about Kiddush, the same thing should be Motzei Shabbos. Beis Hillel is the one that says first wine and then the day. Beis Shammai says first the day, which would be Havdalah, then the wine. Now, who said this Braisa is Beis Shammai? The Gemara is going to prove it. V'hav, so the Gemara asks the one who asked the question, how do you know that this Braisa is Beis Shammai? For you to point out the stira between Beis Shammai and Beis Shammai. Yeah, guys, halt up over here. No, it's in our Mishnah, Yoim, the last one is Yayin. In this Braisa, Yayin comes before Havdalah.
What's the Hine?
Hine is like a Yom HaShishi. It's an intro. Oh, so maybe this Braisa is Beis Hillel, and then it fits because Beis Hillel says in the Mishnah, this is what we're accustomed to. Whenever there's a bracha for the day, a bracha for the wine, first the wine, and then you make the bracha for the day. No, lo yisal kadaitav. That can't be. Why is that? Because since we also mentioned over here regarding the fire and regarding the fragrance, what does the Seder? Diktani mar v'chakach psamim. Uman shamat leidi islei haisvara. Who holds first mud and then psamim? It has to be Beis Shammai. Now, Chevra, whoever remembers, we're going quickly. And our Mishnah doesn't look that way. In our Mishnah, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel appears to be saying that fire comes before psamim. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's just follow the sequence over here. Uman shamat leidi islei haisvara Beis Shammai. Ditanya Amar Rabbi Yehuda lenechelku Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. On the case that we just mentioned, where not only are you using this cup for Havdalah, but you're also using this cup for the benching. And then the question is, what's the Seder? According to Rabbi Yehuda, both of them agree, Alamazon comes first, as we learned above. First is benching. They both agree that on Havdalah it comes the last. Shuhu Basoif. What do they disagree on? Alman Nechleku. Only regarding Moed and Psamim, that's sandwiched in between. And the question is, which one comes first? That Beis Shammai is the one that says, Moed v'chakach Psamim. All of this is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. And Beis Hillel says, the way we do it. Psamim, and afterwards fire. So based on Rabbi Yehuda, by the fact that the Braisa that we learned on top of the Amid says Moed and then Psamim is the Charai, this Braisa is Beis Shammai. So we're back to the question regarding the Seder. According to Beis Shammai, Yayin should have been after Havdalah. That's the question. Mar says, no, let's push back. Umimai de Beis Shammai hi, I believe it, Rabbi Yehuda. This Braisa that we just quoted is Rabbi Yehuda's tradition of what the machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel is. Their tradition. But maybe this Braisa that we learned above follows Beis Hillel, but according to Rabbi Meir's version of the machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. This is very common. Don't forget, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel goes way back. So there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, whoever remembers the Mishnah. In our Mishnah, both opinions said that fire comes before psamim. We don't do it that way. But maybe, the Braisa is following the Shita of Beis Hillel according to Rabbi Meir. So weiter, there's no kasha. That would be a good answer. Where it says, Lo yisal kadaitach, it can be. Because if this Braisa on top of the Amid is following our Mishnah's version of what the machlokes is, the Mishnah, my friends, spoke about the case where you're using the same cup both for benching and for Havdalah. And what did we learn? Beis Shammai says what comes first? Neir, Mazain, Psamim, and Havdalah. Beis Hillel, this is all quoting our Mishnah. Neir, Psamim, Mazain, and Havdalah.
What's the Mazain?
Mazain means Birchas HaMazain. None of them say that Birchas HaMazain comes first. What did we learn on top of the Amid? Mishal Shilin Kulan La'acharav. So the Braisa from the top of the Amid certainly is not following Rabbi Meir's tradition, not on Beis Shammai nor Beis Hillel. V'hasan the Braisa meaning on top of the Amid, Ktani im ein loy elo koisechad manichel la'acharav mazar mishal sham kol la'acharav ishamat minah. So that alone is clear that the Braisa we learned on top of the Amid is quoting Shitas Beis Shammai. It has to be Beis Shammai. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Beis Hillel, Psamim comes before the Neir. So it's according to Beis Shammai, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So now we're back to the kasha. Mikom mokim kasha, chevre, what's the kasha? Why does Beis Shammai say in our Mishnah that when it comes to Kiddush, first you make the bracha on the day and then you make the bracha on the wine? Why is it by Havdalah, according to Beis Shammai, he's moided to Beis Hillel, wine, and then Havdalah? Answers the Gemara, you're right, the Brais on top of the Amar is Beis Shammai. We want to expand Shabbos as much as we could. And it has to do with the bracha we make on Shabbos when Shabbos comes in. And Shabbos ends when we say Havdalah at the end of Shabbos. Now it makes a lot of sense. According to Beis Shammai, Shammai says first you say the words of Kiddush, then you make the bracha of wine. You know what you accomplished? You made Shabbos a little bit longer. Because you said the bracha Mekadosh Shabbos a second before Beis Hillel would say it. Beis Hillel first makes the yain. Let's go to the end of Shabbos. Beis Shammai wants us to say Havdalah at the end to delay the exit of Shabbos as much as we could. So now it fits. Answers the Gemara Kosavri Beis Shammai Shane Ayule Yoima. There's a difference between taking in the day, Ma'afuka Yoima, for taking the day out. Beautiful. Ayule Yoima. Shabbos coming in, what's the goal? To make Shabbos come in, the sooner the better. Kama the makdemina le adif. The earlier the better. Afuke Yoima at the end of Shabbos. Kama the ma'achrin le adif. Kihecha deloy lehevi alon kamasai. So it should not appear, you can argue, big deal, it's a second. And anyways, you're benching. You're not doing malacha now. Doesn't matter. In order for us to show through our action that it doesn't, Shabbos is not a oi Shabbos. It's Shabbos, Gavaldik. So we expand it. So everything is good. But now we still have a problem. Okay, so we established the Braisa that we started out today on top of the Amid is Beis Shammai. Frek the Gemara, V'savri Beis Shammai, Birchas Hamazon to una kois. That's a new question. Because, don't forget, if a guy only has one cup, you know what kind of chiddush we're learning here? You don't make Havdalah, all because you have to bench holding the cup. Beis Shammai, who says Beis Shammai holds of that? For Hatanan, we learned in our Mishnah, on one of the arguments, that Balahem Yain La'achar HaMazon, if wine comes after you ate, La'achar HaMazon does not mean after Birchas Hamazon, it means before Birchas Hamazon, after you ate. So the question is, when could you drink it? Im ein sham elo oisakais, according to our Mishnah, Beis Shammai says, first you make a bracha on the wine, and then you make a Birchas Hamazon. Now what does that mean? We started today quoting the Tosfos, that L'kula Alma, you can't make the bracha of wine before you bench, because benching ends a meal. That's why when you're holding a cup, when do you make the bracha? At least the truth is, Tosfos is going on Beis Hillel. But when do you make the bracha on Beis Hillel? You make it at the end. You make it at the end. The Mishnah says you make a bracha on the wine before. And the Havamina is, my love, that Beis Shammai is saying, you make a bracha and you drink the cup. You don't have to bench ala kois. So how can the Brais on the top be Shitas Beis Shammai? According to Beis Shammai, you would never delay Havdalah, make Havdalah, drink the cup, and then have a meal. Then have Malav Malka. You won't have a cup. Beis Shammai doesn't need a cup. So the Gemara says, no, you didn't understand our Mishnah. Our Mishnah holds that when wine comes at the end of the meal, when he's saying make a bracha on the wine, all Beis Shammai means is make a bracha, drink a little bit of the wine, and then bench. But you have to leave enough to bench. Loy, the mevarechi lave umanach le. So says the Gemara, what do you mean you make a bracha and then you bench? Does it mean you make a bracha and you don't even taste it? That can be. For ha'amar mar ha'mevarech, at least tzarech sheyitam, you have to at least taste of it. So the Gemara says, no, that's what you do. Beis Shammai is saying, you want to drink wine, make a bracha and taste some of the wine. The timely. Oh, you taste it. That the moment you drink out of a cup of wine, you're poigim it. Now, being poigim wine is a ruchnisdika thing. It doesn't make drinking it later a halachic problem, but it does disallow us to use it for any koishol bracha. And the way you unpoigim wine is by pouring some more wine into that cup. Very important.
Well, the poigim comes from the tasting, right?
Poigim is the fact that your mouth went on it.
So if he made Havdalah and then poured some out of
Very good. One second. To'amai pagamai answers the Gemara. Who says, Beis Shammai says you make a bracha and you drink it before benching. But you don't drink it by putting the cup to your mouth. The time lay biyadei. You drink it with your hand. Guys, get used to this. You make a bracha. Now, when you make a bracha, you hold the item in your right hand. Then you poured some in your left hand. You didn't have kalim. And you drink it out of your hand. Oh, so you were not poigim it. So the Gemara has another problem. Okay, even if you did that, the shiur, we're not even speaking about what we learned yesterday, 2 days ago, the extra bracha of having a kois mole. No, you need to have a revius. And b'chlal, the cups those days was of the size of a revius. So if you're going to pour any of it out, you're not going to start out with the right shiur. Answers the Gemara, no, punkt. The case of the Mishnah was that you had a cup that was bigger than the revius. And therefore, the nafish lay tfei mishure, there was more than the revius. So even though you poured some out in your hand and you drank of it, not you were poigim it, and you still have a revius left.
You don't have to drink the shiur.
No, just make be time. Very good. But you have to koishol bracha over the revius. The words are im ein sham ela oisa hakois, and these words are mashma. They lead us to understand you only have that cup. Again, the cups then were of the size of a revius. So it's almost as if the Mishnah says you only have a revius. So the Gemara says no. What the Mishnah means is you don't have 2 cups. If you would have enough for 2 cups, then you would do it like everyone else does. First make havdalah, and then have your meal, and then bench. Today lo have. You don't have 2, but meichad nafish, but there's more than 1. Still akasha. Veha tani rabechia beishamai oimrim mevarech alayayin. In this case, when they bring out wine at the end of the meal, the Inyan of Beishamai says, drink the wine before the end of the meal, and then bench. He doesn't say taste it. The Rabchia's version in Beishamai is mevarech alayayin vishoiseyu. Vishoiseyu, my friends, doesn't mean to pour a drop out in your hand. Drink up the cup and then do birchas hamazon. So says the Gemara, now we must say what we try to avoid. Ela trei tanoi v'alibah de Beishamai. In other words, that the brayso that we started out today, shiur holds, that Beishamai holds, that you have to bench holding a cup. Va'at kedei kach, that Motzoi Shabbos, you come home, you only have 1 cup of wine. Eat before Havdalah. Eat meaning Asudas Malka, eat Melava Malka. According to Rab Chia's version in Beishamai, clearly, he holds, since he holds in the case where wine is brought at the end of the meal, first drink up the wine, then bench. According to him, he wouldn't hold that you make Havdalah while you bench. He would hold, make Havdalah v'ayid. Don't eat anything before you make Havdalah, and then have the meal, and you don't have wine, Okay. Beishamai Yoimnim, now we're moving on to the second machlokes in the Mishnah. What was that machlokes? The machlokes was, do you wash your hands and then pour the cup? When the Mishnah says moizgin, mizigas hakois means to mix, to dilute it. But when the Mishnah speaks about diluting the cup, it means diluting it and drinking it. Nowadays, this goes, the Mishnah is speaking about Shabbos or the weekday. Let's go to Shabbos. What do we do now? We come home, we make Kiddush. After Kiddush, people drink from the wine. Afterwards, you wash your hands, and then you have the hamoitz. Beishamai says, no, first wash your hands, and then make Kiddush, and then right away eat the challah. By the way, if a person has no wine, and therefore you have to make Kiddush on challah, which is a halachically valid substitute for the wine, when you don't have wine, that's exactly what you would do. Because you make the Kiddush, you don't say, and you say, hamoitzi lechem min haaretz, and after Mekadosh Shabbos, you're going to eat the challah. Of course, you have to wash first. Beishamai says, if I'm not mistaken, some yakas do that until today. I think some people today wash first. Anyway, whether they do or not, they wash.
Wait, wash first and then drink wine?
Then make Kiddush and then eat. No, dry wine. In other words, by Kiddush Friday night. That's Beishamai. Now, what's the underlying machlokes? And as we said in the intro, not only for the second argument in the Mishnah, but for a few arguments in the Mishnah, the machlokes has nothing to do with the meal, has everything to do with the laws of Tumah and Tara. So here is our good Bekitzer Dika review. There are Dinei Tumah Midoraisa. And the rule normally is that whenever one thing that's Tameh conveys Tumah to something else through halachic contact, normally the Tumah goes down 1 notch. So if something starts out being on the level of an Av, if there is halachic contact, that's very important. Whatever that is, sometimes it doesn't even have to be physical contact. The item that wasn't touched it goes Avi Avois, Av, Rishon, Sheni, Truma, and Kachim can become a Shlishi, Kachim can become a Revi, and the Afar Mechatas can even become a Chamish. Now, there's a rabbinic halacha that whenever a source of tuma that could be metama truma, which means even something only on the level of a sheni, if it touches any one of the 7 halachic liquids, the 7 halachic liquids as a mnemonic, yad shachad dam. These words, every letter is from another liquid, which includes wine. We'll just speak about the wine over here. If even only a sheni touches liquid, midrabanan, the liquid becomes a rishon. As we learned not that long ago, maybe even in Nida, certainly a lot in Kachim, there is one type of liquid that biblically is already in the status of a av, which is the mashkin that leaves the body of a zav or a zav. So they were, so not to think that big deal that it's a liquid, they made it to become a rishon, and then they made another takana. Normally, by Torah law, if a rishon touches something else, it can only convey tuma to oichlin and mashkin. Midrabanan, mashkin can convey tuma even to a utensil, rendering a utensil a rabbinic sheni. By Torah law, there is no person who's a sheni, doesn't exist. Nor is there a keli that can become a sheni. Midoiraisa. Midrabanan, many times a person, midrabanan, becomes a sheni. Not only that, even just our hands has the level of a sheni, which is the whole reason why we do netilas yadayim before we have a su'uda. And a keli could become a sheni. However, let's also remember that when something holy becomes tamei, let's say truma or kohen, you're mechuyev to burn it. If truma is not tamei, it's prohibited to burn it because we have to guard it. The chachamim were afraid that if a person were to forget that this truma is only midrabanan, what would they do? They would go ahead and they would burn kachim and truma because it became tamei. But if it's only midrabanan, you're not allowed to burn it. If something becomes tamei midrabanan, you don't do anything with it. You wait, if it's kachim, until it goes beyond the prescribed time. If it's truma, you wait until it gets decomposes. It's called toilin. So there were certain rules that the chachamim made by rabbinic tuma as a reminder it's only midrabanan. One such rule is that if liquids that's only tamei midrabanan touches a keli, the keli becomes a sheni, but only the outside of a keli becomes a sheni. The inside of that keli remains completely tahor. With these words, we'll get the whole thing over here. So again, the first wide line. Beishamai oimrim, second machlekes. Beishamai holds wash first, then mix the cup, drink the cup, and then eat the bread. And Beis Hillel says what we do. No, first make kiddush, and then drink, and then go wash and begin the meal. First wash your hands. Why? Because if you were to say that first before you washed your hands, what could happen? What might happen? Your hands pre-washing has a status of a sheni. The chachamim's takana that if something touches liquids, it goes back to become a rishon, is even if it had contact with a sheni. Anything that can be metame truma is metame mashkin, making it a tchila, making it a rishon. So if my hands are pre-washed, if some of the wine, when we fill up the cup, as we learned, it should be a kois malei, and we have a minig nach to make it overflowing, so some of the wine can go on the other side of the keli. My hands are going to touch those liquids. What will it make those liquids? Make it a rishon. Midrabanan, what does the rishon do? The rishon is metame the cup, v'yachzru v'yatame sakois. And here is the key, according to Beis Shammai. Now, who cares if the cup is a sheni? This is the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai does not allow us to use a keli, even if the keli is only tamei on the rabbinic level, which is, it's the outside of the cup is a sheni. You cannot use that cup. So to prevent for you to make the cup tamei, wash your hands before you pour the wine. Hold on. The worst question is, why do we have to go so fadreit? If your hands are tamei, your hands will touch the liquid will touch, say just your hands will touch the cup and make a tamei. No, the hands are a sheni. Sheni cannot make, even a rishon on a Torah level cannot make a keli sheni. V'latami yadayim l'kois, says the Gemara, no, yadayim shni is same. The ein sheni ois shlishi b'chulin. Ela al yadei mashke. So holds Beis Shammai. Now, Beis Hillel holds, you know what Beis Hillel holds? Beis Hillel B'chal doesn't care if you drink out of a keli that's tamei on the level of a sheni. Beis Hillel oimrim moizgin es hakois, and therefore first pour the wine, and then wash your hands. But he has a reason why it has to be that way. When we wash our hands, if you notice, many people, rightfully so, are very careful to make sure their hands are fully dried before you eat. That carefulness is dafka because you are about to touch bread. That is where we're very medagdek to dry your hands. If a person were to wash before they make kiddush, then they wouldn't have to be halachically that medagdek to dry their hands. And therefore, what might their hands be? It still might be moist.
Why do you do that for?
For whatever reason. But ruchni is it because it's going to ruin the bread. It's nothing to do with bread. Now, hold on a second. According to Beis Hillel, like we mentioned, Beis Hillel is not bothered by anyone using a cup that's tamei to eat from. A kohen will never use it. A kohen cannot use it because if something is tamei as a sheni, if he'll be eating truma, if it touches truma, it will make the truma tamei. But kohanim are zrizim, people are careful not to do that, according to Beis Hillel. If I'm allowed to use a sheni, so it could be that this cup is already a sheni, the outside of the cup. If I'm going to hold the cup with wetted hands, if I'm going to do netilas yadayim before I make kiddush, I'm not eating bread right away, my hands might not be fully dried. Now, my hands, the water on my hands will become a rishon. Those waters are touching my hands. Rabbinically, hands become a sheni. So the whole netilas yadayim is getting undone. Beis Shammai has no such fear. Beis Shammai never allows us to use a keli that's a sheni. That's the underlying machlokes. Let's read it inside. Because if you're going to say that that the little bit of moisture that's on your hands because you just washed will become tummy because of the cup, like we mentioned, Beis Hillel holds you are allowed to use a cup that's tummy as a sheni. That's going to be matama the waters. And then the waters are on your hands. And again, the Gemara asks a similar question. Who needs the waters? Why didn't you just say, if according to Beis Hillel you can use a kais that's tummy as a sheni, the kais will make your hands tummy. No, the cup, we're speaking about a cup that's tummy only as a sheni. Yeah. Even though the Chachamim said that Yodayim can become a sheni, but in order for Yodayim to become a sheni, only a Rishon makes a sheni.
The wine can't do it.
The wine is tahor. He doesn't even mention that. And we're going to see another din. Very good. Okay. Rabbi Vremel is saying, one second, how about, even if you wouldn't wash your hands, what about the wine? We're going to have that on Amud Beis. No, that's another question.
That's inside the keli.
But he's saying, why don't we say that the wine will go on the outside? We'll see that's also over here. Beis Hillel is not choyesh to that. That wine will go outside. But if your hands will be wet, that's a problem. Because both water and wine is one of the 7 liquids. No. Ein keli mitama adam. Guys, one second. If a keli is an av, you bet it'll be matama adam. We're speaking about this type of keli. Keli that's a sheni. V'nitami lamashkin shebetoichai. Another question. Hold on. If according to Beis Hillel you can use a cup that's tamei, so why isn't the cup mitame what's inside of it? So hache bekeli shenit ma'achayde v'mashkin askinon. Enachanami. If the kais is a rishon, then of course you will not be allowed to use it for kiddush, even according to Beis Hillel, because a rishon midoiraisa makes a sheni oichlin mashkin. When are we saying that Beis Hillel doesn't bother? He's not bothered. He doesn't care if we use a keli that's tamei. He's speaking specifically about a cup that's only a sheni. Just to know, midoiraisa, there is no such a thing. A keli that's tamei as a sheni means that previously rabbinic liquid rishon touched the keli, and just to know in that case, in order for us to have a zecher that this is only a tumah midrabanan, the Chachamim said that the toichai, that the mashkinas, the toichai tar, that the inside of the cup remains tar, and only the outside is tamei. As we learn in Mishnah, keli shenatam achayrav b'mashkin, meaning mashkin that became a rishon midrabanan, achayrav tamein, turning to lafon days in the base, but toichai, the inside of the cup, and not only the inside, the oignoi, the rim, the oznoi, and the ear. The ear is the handles that look like an ear. The yadav means a flat stick. Here we have from Rabbi Steinsaltz's beautiful pictures. It helps. The yadav, all of that is to hide it. Okay. And now, but if nitma toicha, just to make it clear, if the source touched the inside, then nitma kulei. So now the Gemara fears Zois, b'mai komifligi, what is the underlying machlokes? It all begins, could you use a cup that is tamei ma'achayda for bechlal and for kiddush? That's the argument. Beishamai holds asur lishtamish b'kleishin tamu achayda b'mashkin. And why do they say so? Here's a Rabbi Avram. Why do they care? Because you're gonna. It's amazing. Beis Shammai is the Gevura. Beis Hillel is the Chesed. So who do you think would have the cup overflowing? Beis Shammai had the cup overflowing. Many times is that what you think is Gevura becomes Chesed. You do Gevura to your stinginess, and therefore you pour the wine b'harchava. So what's going to happen? There'll be nitzoitzos. Nitzoitzos means droplets. It means that maybe when you'll fill up the cup, some of the wine will go over the rim, and it's going to go on the other side. And since it's going to go over the rim, right? If you're going to use a tummy cup, so therefore v'lekalim mixer shemi yitam al mashkin should be yadav akos. Because according to Beis Shammai, he doesn't allow us to use a tummy cup anyway. So that's not the problem. Beis Hillel holds mutar lishtamish b'kleish tam achayda b'mashkin. You know why? Omri, because Beis Hillel says nitzoitzoitz lo shchichim. Even though people fill up a kois malei, but it doesn't overflow. And therefore, since the cup is allowed to be tamei nachamal, like we learned above, if you're going to wash your hands, should be yadav machmas hakois. And so what? Of course, so what? Because why did you wash until Yadayim? To get rid of the sheni. You're back to square one. And then Beis Hillel says, Davar acher. I have another reason. And we're going to ask, who needs another reason? Another reason is, tekev l'netilas yadayim seudah. Remember we learned above the 3 tekevs? Here you have another tekev. Right after you wash your hands, you have to have a meal. If you're going to wash before you make kiddush, even though you're not being mafsik with things that are not negate to the meal, but it's not tekev, it's not immediate. Asks the Gemara, who even needed that? My davar acher explains the Gemara, even according to you, even because we are afraid that there's going to be a nutzoitz that's overflowing. So my whole chashash, that doesn't exist according to you. Still, you have to admit that I'm right. My opinion is adifa. The take of until shadayim suuda. Pi Chasidus, Netilas Yadayim is getting rid of the Tumah. The Suda is the Suda of Mashiach. Right? That we begin Asay Toiv and then Sur Mirah. But at the end, everyone needs to have the Sur Mirah. When we wash our hands, when we get rid of the Tumah, right after that, we have the Suda of Mashiach. Okay, moving on to the next Machlokes. Here again, this Machlokes is connected to Tumah and Tara. It's Gavalik. What was the Machlokes? It sounded weird. There we're speaking about people that when they're eating, they used to have a towel or a napkin that they would use, that if they would have to, they didn't have the utensils that we had. Even today we have napkins. So the question is, where do you put that napkin? Or that, I don't know, hand cloth, that's probably a better word. So machlekes b'shamim b'sil, do you put it on the table or do you put it on the cushion upon which you're leaning? What's the machlekes there? B'shama yoimrim mikaneyach. Right, b'mapa umanicha ala shulchan. You put it on the table. Beis Hillel says, no, put that napkin on your cushion. Was tutzach? Tana Rabbanan. Let's learn. Beis Shammai yoimrim mikanech yalav b'mapa, hand towel, and you put it on the table. Ve'sheim ato oimer ala keses. If you would put your hand towel on the cushion, now we got a problem. Which is Gzeira Shema Yitamu Mashkin Shabamapa. The towel might have in it, from your prior wiping off wetted hands or a wetted mouth, some of that moisture is in the towel. The question is, how much moisture is there? And we're going to learn this many times, that if there's enough moisture, even though it's absorbed in a towel, but if it's toifeach al manas lahatfiach, which means that if someone touches it, the moisture will be so much that it's like if I touch a towel, not only my hands will be moist, that anything that I touched afterwards will become moist then from my hands, it's toifeach al manas lahatfiach, then we still coin that moisture as halachic liquid. And we're back to all these dinim. Which there might be enough liquid in this towel that will still deem this towel not a keli, but liquid. And so what? Maybe that mashkin will become tamei because of the kesses. No one holds that the cushions have to be tar. See, we don't appreciate this enough because we're not yet keeping all these dinim. It's a big thing, this tuman tara. Kalim become tamei. To be metired kalim, if you could, you have to take it to the mikvah. No one held that the cushion that you use needs to be tar. Start with that. The cushion can become tamei. You could use a tamei cushion. If you're going to put the towel on the cushion, then if the cushion taka is tamei, if there is enough moisture in the towel that it's considered liquid, so nachama, what's going to happen? The liquid in it becomes a rishon, and then you're using it to clean your mouth from the meal. The moment you're going to touch it, now the liquids cannot make your mouth tamei. B'chlal, a person cannot become tamei as a sheni midoiraisa, but the Chachamim said that midrabanan your hands can become a sheni, for which you watch in the Netilas Yadayim. So here again, if you're going to put it on the cushion, if the towel is wet, the towel becomes tamei, and the midrabanan liquid goes back to becoming a rishon. Even if the kesses was only tamei as a rishon, but the liquids become a rishon, and then it's going to be tamei your hands. You have to say that. According to Beis Shammai, tables may never be tamei, and Beis Hillel disagrees with that. Weiter. So again, v'natmei kesses lamapo. Why did you have to even mention that the towel was wet? If the kesses could be tamei, the kesses will make the towel tamei. So Gemara says no. Ein keli, the type of tuma that people were allowed to use, even though the kesses is tamei. We're not speaking about an av. We're speaking about a rishon. A rishon cannot be metame a dry keli. Another kasha, v'natmei kesses legaver gufrei. So what? Why do you have to have wet? Why don't you say that the kesses is going to make you tamei? No, ein keli metame adam. Another important rule. And here Rashi makes it clear: ein keli, that's not an av. An av, of course, can be metame an adam, but the type of kesses, the type of tuma in the kesses that we are allowed to use is not the kesses that's tamei on the level of av that we may not use. But the liquid messes everything up. So what's Beis Hillel? No. Now dafka put it on the kesses. Dafka put it on the cushion. Why? If you put it on the table. Now Beis Hillel is the one that holds, only Beis Hillel, like we learned above. Just like we had before, can you use a cup that the outside is tummy? Same thing over here. Can you use a table that is tummy as a sheni, midrabanan? That's the same achloikis. Beis Hillel holds you are allowed to use a shulchan that's already tummy. So fakert, if you put it on the table, let's read it inside. If the mappa, my friends, is dry, I don't care if the table is a sheni. But if the hand towel becomes wet, I'm eating and I made it so wet that the moisture is tefeach al manas latviach. Now it touches the table. The table is a sheni because according to Beis Hillel, you can use a keli that's a sheni for meals. That's going to be metama mashkin midrabanan as a rishon. Now what's the issue now? Not about your hands. There is food on the table. Food can become midoiraisa sheni. The foods will become tamei. Hold on, why do you have to go through the mappa? If Beis Hillel allows me to use a shulchan that's tamei, so why doesn't that shulchan make the food tamei? Forget about the towel. No, we're speaking about what does Beis Hillel allow, not something that's very tamei. He allows us to use a cup or a shulchan that's tamei only as a sheni, and ve'ein sheni oisei shlishi b'chulin el alidei mashkin.
If you spill your wine on the table while you're having a meal, right? According to Beis Hillel, that would be a problem because now the liquid becomes a rishon.
No, speak it out for those who don't hear. And a chanami, according to Beis Hillel, if you're eating on a table, since he doesn't care if the table is tummy as a sheni, if liquid spills on the table, that liquid becomes a
Rishon.
the liquids become a rishon, and if that liquid will touch any food, it'll take and make it into a sheni.
So you have to say that what Beis Hillel's just he's not concerned about spilling.
He's not concerned. Just like he was, it's all consistent. He wasn't concerned about spillage. Very nice. Just like he wasn't concerned that the cup will overflow. He wasn't concerned about that. Interesting. Beis Shammai savri asur lishtames b'shulchan sheni. Now let's not forget one thing. Let's say the food becomes tummy. Mela. The truth is that chulin is allowed to become tummy. But all of this is that if I'm not a kohen. What about a kohen? Or what about Yidden bisman ba'isheni that undertook to eat their chulin al taharas truma, or even al taharas kodesh? So gzeir mishum oichlei truma. Besilol Savrim Muter Lishtamish B'Shulchan Sheni. What are you afraid that someone who's eating truma will mess up their food? People that were on that level, both Kohanim, is the reason, and even non-Kohanim, Yisraelim that eat their truma on that level of tahara, oichlei truma, is the reasoning. Okay. Then Beis Hillel again tells Beis Shammai, davar acher, I'll give you another reason. Ein netilas yodayim luchulin min haTorah. What does that mean and why was it needed? Explains the Gemara. Hachi come Beis Hillel Beis Shammai, v'chi teimnu. You, Beis Shammai, can challenge me. What do I gain? The truth is, Taka, what did Beis Hillel gain? Beis Hillel says, don't put it on the table. Hold on. But when you put it on the cushion, there's also a problem. If the towel is wet, then the water becomes a rishon. Then your hands will become a sheni. So there's a problem either way. Either the food will become a sheni, or your hands will become a sheni. So why is Beis Hillel more concerned about the food not becoming a sheni? Let him be concerned. If you put it on the cushion, your hands will become a sheni. So it says Beis Hillel to Beis Shammai afilu achi ha'adifa, because the ein netilas yadayim l'chulin min haTorah. Biblically, there's no such a thing as yadayim that's sheni. Biblically, there is such a thing as chulin that's a sheni. Now, of course, not in this case, because if the waters are only rishon midrabanan, the concept of sheni by food is a doiraisa concept. The concept of yadayim sheniyos is only a rabbinic concept. So if I have a potential problem, which one should I look after more? That which is in the world of the doiraisa. I have to pick and choose. No matter what, there's a problem here. Mutiv sheyitamu yadayim deleis lahu ikir mi doiraisa, va'al yitamu eichlin the islu ikir doiraisa. The beginning of the medium-sized line. Beautiful. Let's move on weiter.
Why not just say don't use a wet towel? Can I just solve all this?
Amri, I love you. Go trust him. Now you're joining the club.
You're drying your hand.
Yeah, but they have to be second-degree wet. They have to be very wet.
Not that wet. I love these questions. Okay, it's a given. They're going on the premise this is going to happen. So what setting is the best to avoid it getting worse? To tell a person that when you're eating you can't make your towel wet, they felt that you can't do that. It's too difficult. And by the way, the one who asked the question is a kohen. You see, maybe Kohanim talk. We're very careful.
You could also say if you have a tummy cushion, don't put it on the cushion.
Don't put it on the cushion.
If you have a tummy